Okay, and I think we're good to start.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Voorhees Township Committee meeting of August 9th, 2021. Would everyone please rise and join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Betroy,
Present.
Mr. Platt,
Here.
Ms. Nacito, here, Mayor McDonough.
Here. Before we do the sunshine statement, I would just like to share with the community that our Deputy Mayor, Jason Ravitz, has contracted COVID and he's struggling a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to please join us in thoughts and prayers for Deputy Mayor Ravitz for a quick recovery. We're all thinking of him and hope he gets better soon. So thank you. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of committee, administration, and members of the public. This meeting is being held in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act, also known as the Sunshine Law. Due notice of this meeting has been published in the legal newspapers by the clerk of the Township of Voorhees and posted on our website. Also, a copy of the annual meeting notice has been posted on the bulletin board outside the Township Clerk's office. This regular meeting will be conducted remotely without providing a physical meeting place and by electronic means in accordance with Public Law 2020, Chapter 11. You should be aware that this meeting is being recorded and may be made available for public viewing at a later date. In addition, with respect to our public portions that are on the agenda, please be advised that the Township of Voorhees highly values the input of citizens in making the important decisions that affect the residents of our community. We believe in the right of citizens to observe governing body meetings. To ensure that all citizens have the opportunity to participate in our meetings and offer comment, and to ensure that the governing body can conduct the important business of the township, we ask that speakers follow the following guidelines in making public comments. 1, the mayor will recognize those individuals that identify themselves in the raised hand function in cooperation with our tech department who wish to make comment. 2, all members of the public participating in the township committee meeting must treat each other and the mayor and township committee with respect. 3, please state your full name and address for the record. 4, please limit your comments to 5 minutes, and individuals offering public comments are not permitted to make personal attacks on any employee, the mayor, the members of township committee, other testifiers, or other members of the public. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Our first matter this evening is the second reading of an ordinance of the Township of Voorhees, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey, amending Chapter 152 zoning district to include Section 152-170 cannabis establishments. This is the second reading of an ordinance, and we will have a public portion. Before we get to the public portion, I've asked our zoning and planning board solicitor, Stuart Platt, to give us a brief overview of this ordinance and the cannabis situation. Stuart?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the Township Committee, and other township officials and members of the public. Just want to give a little background to how we got to where we are and what we plan on doing this evening. As most of you know, on February 22nd of this year, Governor Murphy signed into legislation the legalization of adult recreational cannabis, along with a lot of other laws and regulations that essentially decriminalize marijuana. And in that law that was voted on by the public back in November of 2020, last year's presidential election, the statistics in Voorhees were overwhelming. Almost 75% of all those folks that voted in last year's election, and it's a lot because it was a presidential election, overwhelmingly supported the legalization of marijuana, adult marijuana, recreational marijuana in the township of Voorhees. And the legislation was really designed to allow cannabis businesses to come in and compete for licenses and to really provide municipalities with a form of non-property tax revenue and economic development that would not continue to bear on the backs of New Jersey residents, and would be another way for a municipality to raise revenue and to also create jobs for the community. So with that in mind, the legislation gave each municipality in the state of New Jersey 180 days, or until August 21st, which is right around the corner, to do really one of three things. One would be to adopt an opt-out ordinance to prohibit recreational marijuana in your community. Number two would be to opt in, which would allow the municipality to control where it was to be located and the conditions under which a cannabis business could actually be established in the township. And then finally, the third option would be to do nothing. And to do nothing would mean that there would be no controls over the municipalities, or virtually no control by Voorhees over where cannabis businesses could be located. There would be no conditions, there would be no restrictions. And with the last two options, if the township opts in and or did nothing, there would be a 5-year waiting period for the township to take any other action to opt out. So with those three options in mind, the township and the planning board got working on trying to craft a ordinance that would allow for cannabis businesses in Voorhees Township, but in the appropriate locations. Now, for those of you who know me, my firm and I have been the planning board solicitor virtually since 1996, and we've seen a lot of growth in the town. And so my office, along with Mika Opti, who's our township planner, along with members of the planning board who really look at this all the time, were tasked with the responsibility of coming up with locations and conditions under which cannabis businesses would be allowed. And so what we did was we came up with the ordinance that you have here tonight for second reading and final adoption. And with respect to timing on this ordinance, it's very critical that we opt in and we adopt this ordinance as is tonight, because if we don't, then the state default opt-in, which gives us no control over, or virtually no control over location, and absolutely little, if any, control over the conditions upon which you can have a cannabis business, would be allowed. So it's very critically important that if the committee wishes to have opt-in and have these economic opportunities, but limited and designed to strike a balance between economic development and the protection of residents and our children, that you would act favorably on the ordinance. And let me talk to you about the ordinance itself. In the state statute, as well as in the ordinance, there's essentially 6 different types of licenses or cannabis businesses. You have class 1, they're all noted as classes. Class 1, which is a cannabis cultivator, or basically what's known as a grow facility. Class 2 is a cannabis manufacturing license, and essentially that's a facility that the cannabis would go from the plant into the processing that ultimately makes it digestible, edible, or available for recreational use. Class 3 is a cannabis wholesaler dealer, and as the name would connote, it would be the wholesale, it wouldn't be a sale to the public, it would be sale to retailers who would then sell to the general public. Class 4 is a cannabis distributor license. That's really an ability to distribute, sort of like an Amazon or a way for a distribution center that would distribute the product to either wholesalers or retailers. A class 5 is your retail dispensary. That would be akin to under the old law, a medical cannabis pharmacy. In this case, it would be a retail dispensary. And then finally, class 6 is a cannabis delivery service, which would basically, it's interstate commerce and intrastate commerce, allowing the delivery of cannabis from one of these classes of licenses to another. So those are the 6 classes that we are that are allowed for by the statute, which is in the opt-in. So what we were tasked to do is what Mayor and Committee said, listen, we want to have cannabis establishments in this community, but we want to have it in the proper locations with the proper protection. So the ordinance is written as follows. In the major business zone, which essentially is along Route 73, we in this ordinance allow all classes of cannabis businesses that I went over. We also allow, in four general zoning areas, the B business zone along Haddonfield Berlin Road, east of Whitehorse Road, we're allowing the class 5 or the cannabis retail dispensary license. In the office 3 zone along Laurel Oak Road and Voorhees Drive, we're allowing the licenses for 1, which is cultivation, 3 and 4, which is the wholesale and distributor, and 5, which is the retail dispensary. And finally, in the TC Town Center redevelopment plan, which with exception is in the town center zone, the former Echelon Mall, and other locations around there where it's permitted, we allow for the retail dispensary. And so committee said, these would be the locations that would be most prominent, essentially in commercial areas and retail areas. And they asked us to also, and in help crafting this, have other conditions. And there's generally conditions are limitation hours of operation between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m., 7 days a week. There's a whole array of security requirements that must be met. And any cannabis business is really subject to that which folks who have been part of the process in town, it's part of the land use site plan control process over the planning board. So even if you get a cannabis license, you still have to go through the planning board, have public hearings, get approval, and you have to meet the conditions of this ordinance. And some of the other conditions of the ordinance include a very extensive odor mitigation control requirements that are especially important when you deal with the cannabis cultivation and when you deal with the cannabis manufacturing or processing. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of conditions in the ordinance, loading areas, things that allow for on-site buffers, and just a number of site plan controls that are prominent and uniform with other site plan controls with similar type of retail businesses, obviously not cannabis, but whether it's retail or wholesaling, distribution, warehousing, similar to those that we already have. We also have parking limitations and size limitations on the buildings and so forth. But the main conditions of this ordinance are as follows. They are what we call buffer or proximity conditions. And these conditions are as the crow flies, as we say in land use, which means that they're on a straight line, or if you draw a diameter around the cannabis business, that cannabis business, no class of any cannabis business in this ordinance is permitted to be within 1,000 feet of a school, within 1,000 feet of a place of worship, and within 1,000 feet of a residential zone. There are no exceptions to that condition in the ordinance. So that, and there's also some other controls as well. So that really is the ordinance that is up for adoption. In addition to that, and it'll be a separate vote of committee, there is an ordinance that is on for introduction and first reading tonight that has additional conditions, and it's an additional limitation. And that limitation is as follows. is that a cannabis business cannot be located within 1,000 feet of the playground area in a public park. So public playground limitation. But there's an exception to that, which does not apply in the other three exceptions. Those other exceptions are unconditional. This has one condition, and that is the 1,000-foot limitation between a cannabis business and the playground area in a public park would not apply if between the proposed cannabis business and the public playground, there is a 4-lane divided or undivided highway, such as Route 73 or Route 561 Haddonfield Berlin Road. But even if that condition were to apply, were not to apply, the other conditions still would. So that would be the ordinance amendment. So we have to adopt this ordinance, or at least it's my recommendation, so we beat the state deadline. We don't want to not do that because we would leave a lot of these controls and conditions really out of our hands. And the state really wanted to have some local control of where the cannabis businesses were, the types of cannabis business, and the conditions under which they can be established with the proper subdivision and site plan controls. In addition, Mayor, and I'll let you elaborate on this, I did have conversations with representatives of the Sturbridge Lakes Homeowners Association. They've asked for additional changes to the ordinance, and those additional changes, I think that committee is interested in considering them this evening, and you can go over them if you wish in detail now or when you get to the other ordinance. And if committee is so inclined to add those additional limitations, if you will, to cannabis business and the ordinance, you can make a verbal amendment to the ordinance amendment that is separate from this, or this ordinance needs to be adopted, and then you would take as separate business the amendment to this ordinance, which we're putting on tonight. Really want to show the public, as Mr. Long said in the beginning, want to show the public complete transparency and give them all the information that we possibly can at this point. So that really is the cannabis land use ordinance, the cannabis land use ordinance amendment. And there's also tonight up for adoption, you'll get to it shortly, but I can finish in now, that there's a cannabis tax ordinance. And that is really the economic development piece along with job creations that is on for tonight's meeting for second reading and final adoption if you so choose. So, Mayor, that's really the extent of the analysis. I wanted to thank all the members of the planning board, township officials who were involved in this process, and specifically the mayor and yourself and all the members of the committee for really spending a lot of time making sure that this ordinance meets the standards of other land use requirements in the township, provides for the economic development that you've made a policy decision to have, while at the same time protecting our residents and our school children. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Stuart. As Stuart said, over the last week or so, we've had some discussions and correspondence with a community leader over in Sturbridge Lakes, who voiced to us a concern of that community about allowing all levels of classes along Route 73, from manufacturing, wholesale distribution, et cetera. So as part of the amended ordinance that we will be introducing tonight, we will also, I am confident, by the way, we will also be limiting cannabis on northbound Route 73 between Signal Hill Drive and William Feather Drive to retail only. That is the result of some discussions, like I said, that we had with the leader and leaders of Sturbridge Lakes. That's the frontage of the Sturbridge Lakes community. So that would be part of the amended ordinance that we would be introducing this evening. So with that, since this is the second reading of an ordinance, I will open it up to the public. If anyone from the public has any comments on this ordinance, please join in.
Allowing the first individual.
Yes, good evening. I guess you've called on me. Am I correct?
Good evening, Ed. How are you?
Good, Mayor. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the mayor and the attorneys, Stuart Platt and Howard Long, for explaining a lot to us about this ordinance in advance of the meeting, and also being attentive to our concerns and our requests regarding it. I probably want to make a little bit of additional request in addition to the way the mayor described an amendment that you're considering. But in any event, probably some people that are going to attend will be concerned about the legalization of marijuana or about marijuana in Voorhees. I'm not going to address that. My remarks are restricted to the concerns of our particular neighborhood, which is the large residential neighborhood of Sturbridge Lakes. And very specifically, our neighborhood, of course, traditionally has always been very affected by our entrances, which are the intersections of Signal Hill Drive and William Feather Drive, and the area between those two intersections. So our concerns are that in light of the cannabis business being so new, and let's call it somewhat experimental, certainly in New Jersey, and also because there are so many types of business being considered, and some of them I think are new to Route 73, or certainly to our section of Route 73. And those would include the manufacturing, the cultivation and distribution, especially wholesale and delivery. Those seem to us as though they might in the future entail some pretty heavy activity of a type that we don't have. And it might change the character of the area that surrounds Sturbridge Lakes. So we believe that the best protection for the residential area would be to limit the actual zoning that you're discussing in the area between William Feather Drive and Signal Hill Drive. Now, and I'm a trustee of the Sturbridge Lakes Association. So we are requesting that you not permit any of the cannabis businesses between that area. We recognize from our discussions with you that you might be inclined to permit the retail. And we think that combined with your description of the 1,000-foot buffers, limiting the zoning in this particular stretch with which our community lies between would offer sufficient protection into the future. And of course, that leaves the whole rest of Route 73 for cannabis development as per your guidelines. I would analogize this to what the township in its wisdom did with hotels and motels in the past. For example, we certainly aren't against the legalization of hotels or motels, but at that time we did convince the township that zoning this particular part of Route 73 might change the character of the neighborhood in the area. So it was limited, didn't include our end of Route 73, if you might. And that was a much less controversial type of business than cannabis. If you do make an amendment along the lines of that I've described, then, and as the mayor has described, then Sturbridge Lakes wants to state that having worked with you, that we will support the ordinance as a whole with the amendment. I would only ask, and I thought it had been discussed, we would have an interest in limiting the cannabis zoning on both sides of Route 73 between William Feather and Signal Hill. And I think that's because there could be lots of traffic noise, pollution. I know you do your best to have ordinance that control those things, but, and I don't think I'll need my full 5 minutes, but just to make one point about that. As an example, we have noise ordinances, and I don't believe any commercial establishment can make announcements extend beyond their property. But we have the Lowe's development, which we did work with you on the development of it. But for like 2 years now, they've been making announcements that extend out of their property. Now, that's not appropriate, and we've made many efforts to stop it. And I think the latest is going to be to have the police come and make noise complaints. But it goes to show you that even though you have mitigation measures in place, such as your concern here, I know people about marijuana have mentioned odor. Even though you have the mitigation efforts in place, once you get a business in place and a problem occurs, it can be all kinds of reasons why it can take a long time to get it under control. That's why we'd like to see the zoning control occur. In any event, we will support your efforts with the amendment. And we do ask that if you would consider limitation for the other side of Route 73 between those two, Signal Hill Drive and William Feather. And with that, I want to thank you again. That's all I have to say on behalf of our association. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else from the public have a comment? Please join in.
Yep, one moment. I'm going to promote them.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Here we go. Hi. Good evening. My name is Pamela Rosenberg, and I'm a resident of Sturbridge Lakes. I'm at 117 William Feather Drive, and I'm speaking tonight about the proposed cannabis ordinance. My purpose for speaking tonight is not about the use of the marijuana. I understand it is now legal in New Jersey, and I do not oppose the marijuana development in New Jersey, Voorhees, or even the rest of Route 73. And I'm speaking in an attempt to preserve the current zone in front of my neighborhood, an area in which I have a unique interest. If this ordinance rezones all of Route 73 in Voorhees to allow the manufacture, cultivation, distribution, wholesale and retail and delivery of cannabis products, this would be a major change to our residential properties. Currently, we do not have any factories or residential centers in our immediate residential area, and adding these would cause serious noise, traffic, and environmental concerns. As was just spoken, it's really tough to go back when a problem occurs. Adding these, I'm worried that these operations would adversely affect the property values and threaten my neighborhood's validity. Therefore, I'm asking the Township Committee not to permit marijuana businesses along either side of Route 73 between William Feather and Signal Hill Drives. I do appreciate your time and thinking about us as a neighborhood, as well as our school that's located right there as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public have a comment? Please join in.
Yep, one moment. Barbara Solari.
Hi, thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate what Pam just said, and I agree. Wait a minute. Okay, I live 175 William Feather. My question is for the mayor and all township members, and I'd like to hear from each person individually. Do you think is it appropriate for any member of the township committee to have a vested interest in this? Isn't that a conflict of interest?
I'll answer that first, Barbara. It's Harry. How you doing?
Hi, Harry.
Hi. We all have different times we're going to be conflicted with things. I know you're referring to Mr. Ravitz, who has an application from 2019 that the state has already seen for not in Voorhees Township. It's in Gloucester City. So anything that happens locally with somebody on township committee absolutely is a huge interest. If they're in the same business as anybody else, it'll be the same thing for Jason as if a new supermarket opened on 73, or if a funeral home opened on 73 for me. So I think that in this situation specifically, he is not conflicted, but at the same time, he's not participating in any of the votes or conversations regarding cannabis.
Michelle, how do you feel about that?
I feel the same as Harry, and actually, Mrs. Sillery, I'm on the other side of that. For me, talk about conflicted, I actually am a resident, as many of you know, of Sturbridge Hill. So for me, one could argue that I'm conflicted because I live here and I have a vested interest, as do the rest of you, of maintaining the integrity of our community, and my children attended Signal Hill School. So to Harry's point about being conflicted, I think when we find that we are conflicted in something, we have to make the decision on whether we need to abstain from the vote, or at which Mr. Ravitz has done, to make sure that our intentions are pure and that we are not mistaken by the public.
Okay, Jackie?
Hi, Ms. Stillery. Thank you for asking and for your questions and for attending tonight. I agree with both Committeeman Platt and Committeewoman Nacito in that we all have instances where we need to consider whether or not there's a personal interest that would equate to a level of conflict. And I think in this instance, Committeeman Rabbits has in fact gone above and beyond his actual obligation, given that he does not have any direct conflict within our town's borders, but given that he does have a business interest in South Jersey that is related, I think that his abstention was the right thing to do. And I believe that, you know, certainly, as you see from the abstentions that he's given so far, that will continue, and he will continue to toe that line of a very conservative conflict view.
Yes, and Mayor, how do you
Thank you.
feel?
I agree with my colleagues. I don't see an issue. I don't see a conflict. He's recused himself from any and all votes regarding the cannabis ordinance. He is a businessman and has a right to conduct business. He has an application from what I just heard in Gloucester City. So I have no issue with it. I don't see a conflict.
Okay, is Lou Bordy still on?
Still on as chief or still on this show?
Is he still on this call? Because I wanted to ask him something.
I don't, oh, there he is. Okay, chief, are you there?
The screen's still up.
I wanted to ask him, I know if we pull someone over for drunk driving, that's a simple test. They blow in it and you could find out if they're drunk or not. But smoking marijuana, how would they do it?
So I can address that, Ms. Hillary, if I may. Each department is having qualified, which been identified as drug recognition experts, DREs, and they're taught to test for, I believe it's 12 specific areas that they test. It's a very sophisticated training. It's a very sophisticated testing process. As you know, marijuana can be in your system. You may not know, but has told us it can remain in your system for a long period of time without you being under the influence of it. But under the new drug, and that was your time, but I'll continue. That was time here. But in order to finish, 2 points I wanted to make. I know that police officers, particularly in Voorhees, will be trained in drug recognition laws, and that there'll be the ability to do those things and charge folks who are under the influence and who are operating. I know it's something that the state chiefs have talked to the Attorney General about, and the state folks, and our chief is so highly thought of. He's actually president of the State Chiefs Association, so he's been very much involved in that. With regard to your earlier question about the obligation to recuse oneself when there's a conflict. So I would never disclose any communications with a client, but suffice it to say that in each and every instance where a member of committee, this committee in particular, would have an issue or potentially an issue, or even the appearance of an issue, they speak to me about it. And I counsel them very cautiously in the interest of transparency, and make sure that, you know, they're advised appropriately, that they follow the correct law and avoid any issues with regard to conflicts of interest and the like. Chief Bordy, there was a specific request regarding the ability of police officers to recognize on a pullover someone's being under the influence. And I know you had to step away for a page that you received, but I had explained the drug recognition expert process. Is there anything else? And the fact that our officers will be trained in that. We'll have officers that will be able to recognize that and write tickets for being under the influence. I didn't know whether there was anything you wanted to add on that.
You covered it. It's nothing new for us. We we're active with enforcement and impairment, and marijuana impairments isn't something new. So everything you said is correct, and we'll continue to be diligent with any of that stuff.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Anyone else from the public have a comment? Please join in.
Promoting the next individual. April Sample.
Hi, yes, my name is April Sample, and I am also a member of the Sturbridge Lakes community. I live at 60 Timothy Chase Drive. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to our comments and to consider the amendments that both myself and my fellow neighbors feel strongly about. I also do not oppose the ordinance as a whole, but I do oppose the zoning near my neighborhood. I agree with Ed and a lot of the other neighbors with what they have expressed already. One difference that I would like to see made is the 1,000 feet buffer between the schools. The way that I understand it is that because of 73, that theoretically a retail store could open right up on the corner of that intersection of Signal Hill, Lakeside, and 73. And I would be opposed to having it right across from my children's school. And then in addition to that, I would like to concur with saying that I asked the township committee to also not allow zoning on either side of 73 from Signal Hill, Lakeside down to William Feather. And that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Earlier in the presentation, Stuart Platt explained that the 1,000-foot buffer is not interrupted as it pertains to schools by a 4-lane highway. So the 1,000-foot buffer would be in effect as it pertains to Signal Hill School. It would not be interrupted by Route 73. I hope that answers your concern with that issue.
And the area that was specifically identified, Mayor, would be within the 1,000 feet, and no facility would be permitted there.
Anybody else have a comment? Please join in.
Promoting the next individual. Jamie Ostino.
Good evening.
Waiting for her to unmute.
Mayor, good evening. Thank you very much, committee. Thank you very much for allowing us to express our views. And thank you for working with us, quite frankly. I think Ed said things quite well, and I'd like to just reiterate his sentiment, and that Sturbridge Lakes really just does not want to see cannabis business along the entire stretch of 73 in front of our neighborhood. So we're asking you to, change that proposed ordinance to prohibit all cannabis businesses along that stretch on either sides. And, I think all of the concerns have already been stated, and there's no need to hash them out. But I think just the voices and numbers, knowing that a number of community members do have these concerns, that it's not just a single individual, is really why I chose to speak. So thank you very much for your consideration. We appreciate your time.
Ma'am, do we address in the beginning? I was uncertain.
Yes, sorry, it's 167 William Feather Drive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Please join in.
Promoting the next speaker.
Just so you know, Mike, there are 6 people waiting for comments, so there are more people after this.
Gregory Oft.
Hi, Gregory Off, 25 Fox Hollow Road in Voorhees. I think all my neighbors have said it pretty well, so I don't need to reiterate or re-say what they've said about our requests for zoning between Signal Hill and William Feather. Again, thank you to all the council people and to the mayor for listening to us and helping us out, as you always have in the past, with everything from the shopping center at Signal Hill and 73 Lowe's, all that stuff. Mr. Platt had said at the beginning, I was hoping he could possibly clarify. I'm sorry, Stuart Platt, I apologize. This, from what I've read, the final rules for the sale, manufacture, whatever, of cannabis in the state of New Jersey don't become finalized until August 22nd. But the state's requiring townships to vote on an ordinance for their townships before or on or before the 21st. Am I correct in saying that?
Mayor, I don't know if you want me to chime in on that or just wait till he's done.
Please, Stuart.
Yeah, so the Cannabis Regulatory Commission was established, Mr. Off, to establish regulations and sort of a structural framework primarily for the whole licensing application and approval process. There will be some other measures that are part of that. Their deadline is different than this opt-out, opt-in deadline. So they'll have a little bit more time than August 21st.
Okay, so I also read, I believe it was NJ.com and one other article stating that even if Voorhees Township at this time decided to opt out, that after this deadline of the 21st or the 22nd, whatever it may be, the townships can opt in at any time. Is that correct?
So only if you've opted out can you opt in at any time. If you opt in or do nothing, you're opted in or locked in, if you will, to unregulated cannabis businesses for a period of 5 years. You could not go back and opt out.
Okay. So my concern with that, I guess, is I kind of feel like we're signing a contract without reading the fine print. If, like it happens in politics and government all the time, if there's last second changes to the state rules or laws, or how does that affect our ordinance? If they do things that we don't like as a township or you guys don't like as a board, are we automatically locked in if we agree? Are we able to pivot and make changes?
So we are, we can amend the zoning and land use aspects for sure. Obviously, if there are state mandates that preempt our local land use and zoning requirements, for instance, one of the things that they had in the former medical marijuana, the Jay Koenig law, Compassionate Care Act in 2010, was for whatever reason, the state decided they were going to regulate lighting for these facilities. Okay. So that we might be preempted by that. But the part that you're talking about is the regulatory structure for those people that are in the cannabis businesses to apply for and receive a limited number of licenses. The state has really left the land use local control to the local government. And yes, we can amend this ordinance from a zoning perspective. So the regulations that have not been adopted yet are really the regulatory structure of getting a license if you've applied for one, not for what we're doing here this evening.
Okay. I don't know if Chief Bordy is on. Just a quick question for him. Chief Bordy, do you see this impacting, I guess, the township in a negative way? Do you see this becoming a strain on, an already strained police department with a growing town? Is this something that you're concerned about?
So with anything new like this, I've never stopped being concerned about driving under the influence of alcohol. So there's a concern. We're going to monitor it and manage it. I think we'll, like most things, try to stay ahead of it. So it certainly has my and many chiefs across New Jersey's interest in to see how it plays out and which direction it goes. But we'll try to plan for it and stay ahead of it for sure.
All right, thank you. And just one last thing. I don't know how much time I have left.
but go ahead and wrap up. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to reemphasize what Ed said when he first spoke earlier in the day. Once a business is in place, it is really, really hard to obviously change the ways we're doing things. And, Lowe's is a prime example. I've lived in this neighborhood since the late 80s. When they first went in, they were a great neighbor. You never saw the lights, you never heard their business, you never heard the loudspeakers, you never heard the deliveries. And over the past few years, that has completely changed. I know our organization here in Sturbridge has kind of been on top of it, trying to make changes, but I hope that the township takes that into account moving forward. Thank you for your time, and thank you again for taking the time to listen to all of us and our concerns. I really appreciate it.
Sure, we can certainly take steps to address that concern with Lowe's. We can have our officials go over, speak to them, and that's something that we can, Mr. Spellman will get on, and we'll do what needs to be done. Okay.
Mayor,
There's a meeting scheduled tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, they have a meeting set up with Lowe's already because we had all gotten complaints. It's already been reached out. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, they're set to talk to Lowe's. We understand the concerns there, absolutely.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else from the public have a comment? Please join in.
Promoting the next individual. Joanne Savio.
Okay, hello, I'm sorry. Just as my name was called and my screen went forward. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Name and address record, please, ma'am.
Joanne Savio, that's Savio. I'm at 5 Chatham Drive in Sturbridge Lakes. Chatham is approximately 1 mile in from 73 along William Feather. So I don't suffer from the Lowe's interference and things like that. But from what I understand, you're talking about the area in front of Sturbridge Lakes, which is basically the Cedar Hill development, and between Signal Hill and William Feather. And then 1,000 feet to the north and south of that. Is that correct?
North and south of the schools or church houses of worship.
Right, 1,000 feet is a couple of short blocks or a couple of pedals on a bike. What I would be concerned at is that next to, or if Greenlee were to sell or whatever, or we've had that plot of ground, the grassy knoll next to Signal Hill School, that's always been a source of conflict for development. I mean, we're talking about very adjacent to those two areas. I would not like to see a cannabis factory.
They wouldn't be allowed there. That would be within 1,000 feet of the school, the one right next to Signal Hill. The other property, I don't know the measurements from any churches, synagogues, or schools from, but I know the one right next to Signal Hill would not be permitted due to the 1,000-foot uninterrupted barrier there.
1,000 feet isn't that far.
It's the Lou, it's a criminal statute for Lou.
I think
Harry, I can tell you that the 1,000-foot distance is that which is in the drug-free and safe school zones. That's by statute already. That 1,000 feet has been a fairly time-tested buffer regulation for not that cannabis will be considered a drug, but that was the standard that we based this on.
I guess I'm not making myself clear. I'm saying 1,000 feet is not enough. In other words, to protect our development and to protect the children, and also just the aesthetics of the area. I would like to see that. I mean, I'm coming late to the party here. I guess I would have opposed the ordinance, but if you're saying a cannabis factory, I'm sorry, I can't see.
Mayor, if I may answer that question, this is Mika.
Yes.
So the 1,000 feet buffer is from house of worship, it's from schools as well as residential zone, which is essentially the Sturbridge Lake community. And if we draw a whole buffer of 1,000 feet around it, the specific area you're talking about would not, any kind of manufacturing or wholesale, type of cannabis establishment will not be allowed. Having said that, there are other site plan requirements also that are inbuilt in the ordinance, such as, for manufacturing and wholesale cannabis establishment, they would need a minimum lot area of 5 acres, and they'll have to show additional parking and all these kind of site plan conditions that are also required. So these are the additional parameters that have been put in the ordinance to make sure, the establishments, the type of establishments where they're proposed are proposed in a more sound land use planning way.
So then you're fairly confident that we won't see a cannabis factory or something like that, I don't care how attractive it is, between basically Sturbridge Lake and then kind of Cooper. I don't know how far down Cooper is, never measured it, from Signal Hill. But on either side, like Lakeside Drive, you're saying that, I'm thinking that 1,000 feet isn't far enough. I mean, I know you're saying 1,000 feet, but that doesn't go very far before they put something.
The way the ordinance is drafted currently, the 1,000 foot would be, both sides of 73 and a little bit more. So that's the restrictions that's per the ordinance right now.
Okay, well then, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I understand, and I guess I just would like to go on record as saying, I don't think it's enough. I don't think 1,000 feet is a sufficient distance from Signal Hill or from William Feather in north and south to keep maintain the character of the community. I mean, we've had fights about the area, I mean, within the 1,000 feet, the grassy, I call it the grassy knoll, I don't know what people call it. But, we've had a lot of fights about that, but I understand that that would fall within the 1,000 feet. So the cannabis factory won't end up on that plot. But I guess what I would like to go on record is saying, I don't think 1,000 feet is sufficient to protect the integrity of Route 73 from the standpoint of the Sturbridge Lakes community.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Appreciate it. Well received, and your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public have a comment? Please join in.
One moment.
I like how Dean keeps getting replaced.
Not on my screen.
Lynn and Bob Kyler.
Good evening.
You're muted, folks.
We can't hear you.
Your computer is muted. Click the unmute button on your Zoom. If you touch the screen, it'll appear on the window.
Seems to be an issue with their mic volume, not.
Maybe your volume on your microphone can be turned up.
We don't want to move it, right? I mean.
Yep.
We got you.
We
We
have
got
your
you, folks. You got your picture. Now we got to
Yep.
have you mute.
Unmute one more time.
We heard you for a second, so you did something right.
Okay, got it? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Hold on, man. Let me start your time because
But now your time's expired, yes.
My name is Lynn Kyler. I live on 7 Southgate Drive in Elm Tree Farms. And I'm not from Sturbridge. So I just wanted to say that I have concerns about the location of the retail store. We have, I agree with the previous speaker about the 1,000 feet because we're right down the street from the Hamilton grade school. And then we have the daycare on the corner, and we also have a dance studio there. So I have concern. Nobody wants this. Everybody voted in Voorhees, apparently 75% that wanted this, but nobody really wants it in their development. And my concern, same thing with the 1,000 feet. I feel like a retail store that close to the school, and of course the daycare and the dance studio is too close for a retail store. When do we find out where it's going to exactly be? Like when do we find out what decision was made where the retail store is going to be located?
If I could, Mayor, good evening, and it's a good question. So we have a pretty good idea of where it's not allowed and where it is allowed based upon the buffers. But in terms of an actual application, somebody would have to actually be licensed by the state of New Jersey primarily. They could try to come in for land use approval before, but the real issue is they would have to make an application before one of our land use boards, primarily the planning board, for an approval of a retail cannabis business. And when they come in before the board, there's a state requirement. They have to give proper notice to the public and so forth and so on. And an actual business establishment would have a planning board type hearing. If you've ever been before a planning board, full hearing, full application, full public participation. That's when we'd actually know exactly where somebody would want to come in. And of course, if they don't meet the criteria, then they wouldn't get approved by the planning board.
Okay. So there's quite an area along there. My house, the back of my property would come up to the retail stores there. So that's my main concern. I mean, property value. I mean, if I'm going to have this store in my backyard, I have concerns about that. And originally they were going to put last year low housing there. So we were up at the board, we were doing all that. And now we have a site for cannabis. So what is it about this area that seems to be so popular that everybody wants to put, what would you say,
Just retail.
Retail, you know, that this area, for whatever reason, everybody wants to put either cannabis or low housing or some other thing in there.
Well, I can answer that question generally. Where you live off of Route 561,
right?
On not your particular home, but 561 South is located in a commercial zoning district along the frontages. That's where the businesses would go. So it's not unusual that you would have a retail business along there, including a retail cannabis business. But I have to say to you, Mr. and Mrs. Kyler, that there are so many requirements to meet the site plan requirements of a retail cannabis business that until we see an actual application, but we are doing the work now to provide all the protections that we can as a matter of law to prevent there from being an offense, if you will, a conflict between a cannabis business that's along Route 561 and the residents behind, including the buffers, including all the other things that go with it. But in your particular area, the only thing that's allowed is the Class 5
retail.
Class 5 retail dispensary.
Right. Okay. I just, I'm against it. I know that it has to go somewhere, but like I said, nobody wants it in their development. And that's how I feel. I feel like out on 73, people can go there and buy whatever they want. And it's commercial and it's plenty of free open space and everything else. And I think that it's an ideal spot for everything, for the retail, for the, the whole thing. And be putting it into the different communities near the schools. I don't think that that's, and like I said, I agree with the woman before about the 1,000 feet. I think that that's, too close.
Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment?
One moment. I will allow the next speaker. Nicole Nicklaw.
Hi there. My name is Nicole Nicklaw. Thank you for hearing our concerns tonight. My address is 5 Harwood Drive. I'm also a resident of Sturbridge. And I really just wanted to thank the committee for working with our trustees of Sturbridge Lakes and having discussions to help us learn more and to protect our community as much as we can. I support the additional amendments that Ed and our other trustees have talked about this evening. And just thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you still have 4 minutes and 30 seconds left if you want to keep going.
Pay no attention to the man behind the mirror. The window, whatever. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Another comment?
Promoting the next speaker. Alexander Bershadsky.
Yes, it's my name. Hi, my name is Alexander Beshatsky, and I live in Sturbridge Lakes on the 9 Officer Court. So first of all, I appreciate that you get time to talk with us and listen to our concerns and our opinions, and thank you very much for that. I do join my neighbors with their concern, what Ed expressed in the beginning, and several guys actually repeated this again and again. We want to keep our community as it is, and I live actually for 17 years in this community, and enjoy it very, very much. Small comment regarding 100 feet, 1,000 feet. It's actually only 3 football fields, and I'm pretty sure it was because they wanted to kind of limit sales of drugs in schools. Even though, if you remember, a few years ago in our high school was a big bust, police bust, and children were caught with marijuana and some other stuff. Now, Chief Gordy, I have a question to you. Someone already, I don't remember the name, asked before me this question. You a little bit went shallow on it, but if I read from other states, those businesses, they have problems. They have burglaries and robberies because people come to get money, people come to get products from them, steal, to steal. And I don't think that this is very question that, as you answered, that we always ready. In our community, I may be wrong because I read it not yesterday, didn't check, but we have murder probably 5 or 7 years ago in this community. Yes, and robbery probably 2 years ago. What I remember on the gas station in front of Sturbridge Lakes. So we don't have too much crime, but this kind of business obviously will bring additional crime. So what are doing to be ready for this?
So,
Chief, I just want to talk about the ordinance. You could talk about generally law enforcement,
sure,
if I might. Sir, unlike almost any other business that's allowed in Voorhees, cannabis business has specific security regulations both in our ordinance and which will be promulgated by the state statute with their regulations. So I'm no expert in law enforcement, but I am an expert in land use and zoning. And this is really the first time that I've ever seen a particular type of land use that has required manifest security restrictions to it. And we've echoed those restrictions in our ordinance. So I just want to let you know that there is a lot of security restrictions in the ordinance, as well as established by the state statute and the regulations that will be promulgated and adopted pursuant to the state statute. Can you completely guarantee the prevention of no crime anyplace? No, but through the leadership of our chief and our police department, I think there's very, very low crime in Voorhees. Whether the impact of this, I can't say that's up for the chief, but I can tell you there is extensive security requirements in our proposed ordinance.
Okay.
So I know committee shares my vision for safety in our community. They always have. Resources has never been an issue when it comes to public safety. This committee, after hearing my presentations, have always supported the need for additional resources when we see it necessary. We'll evaluate this closely. There's a lot of factors that go into crime and things like that. And I've done some research in South Jersey where there is a large vertical cannabis factory, as some people put it. There's not really an increase in crime there at all. There's more neighbor complaints that the police department has managed. So it's a wait and see, and we hope to stay ahead of any issues there. This committee has always been very proactive with presentations I've made about keeping our community safe, and I don't expect anything different moving forward. I hope that's not shallow. I hope I answered your question.
And if I can answer a little bit more, because I did ask the chief specifically to call this township where there is a vertical license, practically, the growing, processing, everything, to find out specifically about the crimes you just mentioned. And the answer was no. It was parking in the parking lot for this place. It was rear enders because people were bumping into each other. The same has happened to me at Wawa a few weeks ago. But as far as any kind of violent crime, robberies, armed robberies, the answer was flat out no. It just has not done anything regarding that in this facility where this is.
But this happened in other states, yes, because
This was in a town a couple towns over.
Yeah.
That we called, but has an operating facility already there. So
I read about Oregon and California, what happened to some facilities there. No, I don't know. I didn't read about anything here in New Jersey yet.
Right, and I don't know what kind of state statutes Oregon and California have, but as you heard from the chief and heard from the other Mr. Platt, the state has provided security within the regulations to actually get a license to have one of these facilities, and we've reiterated that in our ordinance as well for the same reason. Like Stuart Platt said, can you guarantee nothing will ever happen? Unfortunately not, never with anything. But everything is in place to prevent even the problems that happened initially in the facility a couple towns over. We've already put those things in our ordinance regarding odor control, things of that nature, to alleviate what we know we've seen go wrong other places and to make sure it doesn't go wrong here. So I think we're a step ahead and about putting our ordinance in place to make sure that the highest level in safety, protection for the neighborhood, smells, not having anything on the southbound side of 73 or on the northbound side of 73 we're talking about now. I think that we're trying to do as much as we can and can still do more if we need to.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you again for listening to us. And I want to reiterate again what Ed said in the beginning, request of our neighborhood not to have any facilities between William Feather and our school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mayor, time would be up.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment? Please join in.
I'll promote the next attendee. Nicole Miles.
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Nicole Miles, and my husband and I, Troy Miles, are new residents to the Sturbridge Lakes. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk, and I am in full support of what the SLA, the Sturbridge Lake Association, has shared thus far. I won't reiterate, but I will like to add that as a new resident here in this large community, there's extensive traffic. And it's extremely important to note that Signal Hill Elementary School already has to have a police presence in order for individuals to enter this neighborhood. And they also turn around within our first cul-de-sac, because I actually live at 2 Quail Hollow Court, which is right next to the grassy knoll that has been referenced. And this is an extreme concern for us as new residents here, because that is within 300 meters behind my residence with the tree line. We already see a lot of traffic, and there's already a residential lease sign behind our direct residence. So it is extremely important that when considering this, we talk about this not just being on one side of 73, but on the other side of 73, and that our community from Signal Hill to William Feather is protected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Please join in.
Promoting the next attendee, Donna Smith.
Enable access. Okay. Allow Zoom to. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Donna Smith. I live at 14 Henley Lane. I'm respectfully asking the committee not to permit any class of cannabis business in the area on either side of 73 in front of Sturbridge Lakes, particularly retail. A lot of our teens and young people work in or walk up to the Cedar Hill development to frequent the local businesses. My concern would be should any of the cannabis clientele choose to partake illegally, either coming to or from a retail establishment, there could be an accident or they could hit one of our children. I would be just as opposed to a liquor store for the same reason.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Promoting the next attendee.
How many you have left, John? Do you know?
I see 7 raised
7.
hands.
Okay.
Named as Mary Council.
Hi,
Good evening.
good evening. My name is Mary Council. I'm at 116 William Feather Drive. I'm not going to belabor this. I have lived in Sturbridge for almost 20 years, and I agree with all my neighbors that it is not acceptable to have a cannabis factory, retail, or any type of establishment in our corridor on Route 73. So I would just like to mirror what my neighbors are saying on both sides of 73, and I just wanted to go on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Promoting the next panelist.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Fardette Blanchard Duclair, and my husband and I relocated from New York many years ago, and we've been happy to live in this community for the past 18 years. We currently live at 8 Barclay Lane.
Thank you.
We currently live at 8 Barclay Lane in Sturbridge, and we're right by the tennis courts. And a lot of the sentiments that we share have already been expressed, so I won't belabor the point. But as our trustee Ed indicated, I'm in support of the ordinance. However, I would ask that the restrictions be imposed not just on the north side of 73, but also on the south side of 73. I'm also glad to hear that there's going to be a meeting with Lowe's, and I hope that there are changes that come out of it, because I live right behind there. And as one of my neighbors previously indicated, when Lowe's was initially here, they were great neighbors. They've become a nightmare. And I can see the lights, I can hear the trucks. The announcements are become very, very loud. So I'm really hoping that positive changes can be effective and result from the meeting that you have with them tomorrow. So thank you for hearing my concerns and that of my neighbors, and good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Another comment? Anybody?
Promoting the next one. Scott Riley, I'm promoting.
Hello, my name is Scott Riley. I live at 5 Battery Hill Drive in Sturbridge Lakes. I've lived here for 35 years. So I've lived through a lot of changes on Route 73, including the hospital, which was going to turn us into a major medical corridor, which never really materialized. So now we're switching to marijuana, I assume. I am also an attorney who represents a number of insurance companies that insure marijuana facilities, both growers as well as retailers. So I understand the issues they face. A concern of mine would be, probably for Chief Forty more than anyone, the crime issues that do arise in these instances. In other states, I know there have been an awful lot of increases in things such as burglaries, thefts, and particularly break-ins to vehicles in surrounding areas around the retail facilities. I know we've had a number of bank robberies in our town. We've had a spate of car break-ins. We're constantly getting messages to be on the lookout. What are we going to do to prevent those type of things? Are you going to come to us in 2 years and tell us we need to hire 5 more police officers? Or are we prepared for this already?
I assume you're asking me the question. I think
Any of you.
Okay, I heard you mention my name. Do I think we're prepared? Yeah, I think we are prepared, and we will certainly keep a watchful eye on everything that's going to happen around marijuana distribution, the legal distribution of marijuana in our town. We played an active role, the police department up until this point. We'll continue to do that and manage it as we go. Again, I can't emphasize enough how committed this committee is to the safety of the community. They all live here, of course, and as I do also. So we're all highly committed to the safety of our community. And if we need resources to handle this, I suspect I'll have a plan together and ask for it. But right now, I feel very comfortable where we are to handle it. I don't know, in talking to some of the other towns that have facilities, it hasn't been a strain on their resources thus far. So we'll continue to watch it. I know in some of the other states where you see crime spikes because of it, they're in urban environments sometimes, which are not like what we have. So we just have to stay active with it, as our committee will, and have the police department involved every step of the way, and monitor it and try to stay ahead of it. I think we will.
Okay, great. I mean, as we all know, these places generally do not have bank accounts, not allowed to bank with financial institutions because of the federal regulations. So they carry an awful lot of cash and are sometimes targets for particular people to come and try and rob them, honestly. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues for the insurers who do insure them. So that's a concern, that these people hold a lot of cash in their buildings. And that might also attract some criminal elements. The final issue, of course, is traffic on 73. As we all know, it is a nightmare already. And I have to assume it's going to get worse if we start just allowing buildings, facilities, not only to sell, but to manufacture, as those are generally huge facilities. They take up a lot of space, a lot of trucks in and out. So are we going to be able to handle the traffic in light of the fact that we're also potentially going to have a Wawa right down the road, entering on and off of 73 as well? What would that do to our traffic issues? Does anybody have we done any studies on that?
Keith?
I think the businesses go on Route 73 because there's traffic already there, and the businesses study it, and they're trying to serve the motoring community that's already there. So I think Route 73 is a state highway built to handle traffic. In my mind, there's not much we can do as a local community about traffic on Route 73, a state highway. We manage a very little tiny piece of it. Just to our north, Berlin can put in whatever they want and affect the traffic flow in Voorhees, and we have nothing to say about it. And just to our south, Evesham Township and Cherry Hill can put anything they want on 73 that will affect our traffic flow, and we can say nothing about it. So I don't necessarily worry as much about the traffic on a state highway as maybe some other things.
Well, those of us who drive on it every day do.
I drive on it also, sir.
All right, that's all I had. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Another comment?
Being the next speaker. Hal Guns.
Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank everyone for hearing our concerns as a community here at Sturbridge Lakes. My name is Hal Guns, and I live at 5 Harwood Place and have lived here for close to 14 years now. One of the things I wanted to first do is thank Ed for speaking, and also all the other neighbors that have taken the time to be available to voice their concerns, which I agree with each and every one of them on. One thing I wanted to ask for clarity purposes is, I heard earlier someone mention something that not only is it a 1,000-foot barrier around schools and places of worship, there was something said in regards to parks and playgrounds. So I was curious to know if, given the fact that we have the park with the tennis courts and the ball fields in proximity to the back of the Cedar Hill Center, does that extend as 1,000 foot as the crow flies? Does that restrict that area from retail dispensaries? Because I think someone said earlier that the class that permits retail dispensaries would be allowed between Signal Hill and William Feather. Is that correct or incorrect?
Well, if I can answer that, Mayor. So we have a few different things going on at the same time. In the current ordinance, and it will not change in the amended ordinance if you introduce that tonight, there are 3 1,000-foot restrictions that have nothing to do with highways. There's a restriction from a cannabis business 1,000 feet with a school, place of worship, or residential zone. And there's no exception to that restriction, and it's not being changed. There's an amendment to the ordinance. It's a separate ordinance. It's on for introduction this evening after this ordinance that has in there an additional 1,000-foot limitation to playgrounds only within a public park. And there is an exception to that 1,000-foot limitation if between a proposed cannabis business and that public playground, if you will, there is a 4-lane divided or undivided highway. So that's one thing, that's the clarification. The second piece is the governing body, mayor and committee may tonight make a further amendment to the ordinance, which is again, this playground addition, which may restrict, as requested by Mr. Ferrugia on behalf of the HOA, all classes and types of cannabis businesses, except for retail dispensaries between William Feather and Single Hill, either on the northbound side only or the southbound side as well. That's up for the governing body to make that decision. So, if those tennis courts, if they're not part of a public park, and really the way the playground restriction, sir, is not about athletic fields, it's not about parks in general, it's about playgrounds where children play. That's where the restriction comes in. I hope I've given you some clarification given the limitations of your question.
Well, I guess then to make sure that I completely understand, then I'm sure that Voorhees Township right now is fully aware of where all those 1,000-foot restrictions are. Can you tell us where they are in proximity to Sturbridge Lakes? Is it just the school? Is that the only one that has a 1,000-foot restriction?
Okay, again, I'll repeat, the restrictions are fourfold, threefold in this ordinance, and there'll be additional one in the amendment. There's a 1,000-foot restriction between any proposed cannabis business and a school. There's a 1,000-foot restriction between any proposed cannabis business and a place of worship. There's a 1,000-foot restriction between a cannabis business and any residential zone. In addition to that, there will be a 1,000-foot restriction between any proposed cannabis business and a public playground within a public park, with one exception. It only applies to this playground limitation, and that is if there's a 4-lane highway between the public playground and the proposed cannabis business.
I understand everything you just said, but what I'm asking is, do you know what the restrictions are in proximity to Sturbridge Lakes, specifically Signal Hill School, and are there any other specific ones?
Church on 73.
Well, we have Lions Lake Park, for instance, okay? I believe there's a playground area in Lions Lake Park. Mayor, members of the committee, help me out. If there's
There's also a place of, there's a place of worship, and maybe Mika wants to weigh in here because I believe that there's a place of worship that would affect, as well as obviously the
There's two
residential
actually,
zone.
Jackie. There's two places, just a
Yeah.
place of worship there, which the 1,000 feet would be continuous regardless of the state highway.
Correct. Mika, maybe you can tell us
Sure.
about the buffer zone since you've mapped them.
Yeah, so the 1,000 feet is not only around the Signal Hill School that the applicant is talking about. There is any kind of house of worship around there that has the 1,000-foot buffer, as well as the residential zone, which is essentially the Sturbridge Lake community. It's entirely located in residential zone, so there'll be a 1,000-foot buffer around it also that would be applied. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
We are We are at the 5 minutes plus, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Do we have another comment? Please join in.
Voting the next attendee. This will be Ann Picker.
Hi, good evening.
Good
evening.
Okay, I'm going to start my video following directions. Hi, my name is Ann Picker. I'm also Sturbridge Lakes, 8 Chatham Drive, along with my husband, Dennis Killey. We're pushing 30 years in Sturbridge, so we've been here a long time. We've been voters a long time. I add to that, I agree with everything my neighbors have said, and I wholly support Ed Ferrugia's position. I would just like to add that both the south side and the north side would be better. I do realize the houses of worship are on the north side. I mean, no, the south side. And that would also impact those 1,000-foot zones. But I do wholly support, I appreciate that you as our committee have also talked to people and worked out the amendments that you're making. And I will say, from having also been a criminal defense attorney for pushing 30 plus years, I don't think that a marijuana dispensary is going to cause a huge uptick in violent crime. There may be some smaller things. I would ask the police chief if he has any comment on that, but I have not found Sturbridge to be particularly violent in nature over the long haul. And in my defense experience, that marijuana users have been particularly violent by and large. So thank you for your time, but I would invite the police chief if he disagrees with me to say so.
No, if I understood you correctly, you don't expect violent crime to be associated with marijuana dispensary. I don't think we haven't seen that here in Camden County with the vertical facility. So I don't expect to see it here, even if we had our own vertical facility. But you know, we would do our best to manage it. Like I said, we are going into it with both eyes wide open. We've been involved in the process with planning and zoning and the committee. They've kept me involved every step of the way. So hopefully if we see an uptick in anything, we're gonna be able to mitigate it and try to nip it in the bud. Someone else earlier said, you know, I would love to tell you there's a wall up around Voorhees and there's not going to be any crime in here ever. I would love to say that. We all know it's not a reasonable expectation, but by and large, I think we do a really good job and we try to really stay ahead of things. We're very attentive. We'll continue to be that way. And that's our goal going into it. Eyes wide open.
Thank you. And thank the committee for taking us into consideration in amending things.
And thank you for sharing that perspective. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another comment? Please join in.
I will promote the next attendee. Andy Brzezowski. Mr. Brzezowski, if you could unmute.
How are we doing, John?
I will put Mr. Brzezowski back as an attendee, and then we'll just continue. I wrote his name down so we can come back to him.
Thanks.
At the end. Oh, wait a minute. He started hopping on. Let me bring him back. Here we go.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Oh, so I apologize. My phone is acting up. So my name is Andy Brzezowski. I live at 4 Talwood Drive in Sturbridge Lakes. I am a member of the planning board. And first of all, thank you for your time and efforts on this issue and allowing me the opportunity to speak. So my question pertains basically to all of Voorhees and not just the section of 73 between Signal Hill and William Feather. And I apologize if my question is untimely or inappropriate for this forum, but can you speak to the decision or the analysis to include all types of cannabis businesses versus select types of businesses? For example, only allowing a retail versus a manufacturing and growing. And is it an all or nothing decision?
Mayor, I can address that. So right now, as it's presently constituted, I know there's an amendment that's up for consideration. Andy, how are you, by the way?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So all classes would be permitted on both sides of Route 73 right now. Only retail dispensary along Haddonfield Berlin Road. Cultivation, processing, and retail along Laurel Oak and Voorhees Drive. And then only retail in the town center redevelopment area. And the reasons why those decisions were made is, and why at least from the planning board's perspective, so it's not all classes every place. It's limited, and it's limited to certain areas. The planning reason, again, the planning science behind this to have all classes along Route 73 is because it's a transportation hub. It's a state highway, and there are properties where these types of facilities could go, especially when you're talking about distribution and manufacturing and the transportation of them. You have to take a little bit of a analysis of what the market will bear. So if it's off the beaten path, more likely to be just a retail establishment. If it's on a major state highway, you'd have the other classes. So that's why there's been distinctions made between the 4 locations in the ordinance as contemplated. But of course, there's an amendment up to limit the area between William Feather and Signal Hill on either northbound side only or on both sides to just retail dispensaries only. That was the planning consideration that was made, that went into why we distinguish different classes from different locations.
Thank you. So I guess my thought would be, since it is a relatively new industry, and considering the benefits of letting the industry mature a little prior to jumping into all classes, I think retail, for example, is probably a little bit more safer in terms of the unintended consequences that we might see. But I guess maybe get your thoughts on the benefits of delaying potential certain types of businesses until we get a little bit more understanding of how they're going to operate and what the consequences are to the surrounding areas.
Well, we do know about cultivation facilities, the difference between retail and cultivation and processing. Of course, customers don't come to a cultivation or a greenhouse facility. Customers don't come to a processing or wholesaling facility. But of course, large vehicles might, not the cultivation necessarily, but vehicles might, and they have challenges. There's a difference between any kind of manufacturing, warehousing, and retail. So there's positives and negatives. They're not always open all the time. Retail probably puts more traffic on, potentially more traffic than less traffic, but the quality of traffic is different. The quantity of traffic is different. So again, Route 73, for better or for worse, is a state highway. So these opportunities are designed to put the most appropriate licenses in the most appropriate locations. With so many restrictions and so many site plan controls, that I hope we ever get one license any place in Voorhees.
Okay, that's fair. So I appreciate the background and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have another comment? Please join in.
Promoting the next attendee. This will be Maureen Geary.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, my name's Maureen Gary. I live on 5 Ashton Drive in Sturbridge Lakes for the past 21 years. I want to thank the Township Committee for this public address. First, I just wanted to state that just because the voting results in Voorhees Township was over 70% for legalizing marijuana does not mean we wanted zoning retail on Route 73. Possibly if we knew of this information beforehand, the voting results could have been significantly different. It's just something I wanted to state. I also wanted to be on the record for saying that 1,000 feet is not enough and having this zoning not allowed on both sides of Route 73, both southbound and northbound. That is a very important issue with our elementary school, the daycare center at our school, 3 parks in our neighborhood. These are justified concerns. In addition, I had a question about the retail dispenser. It was mentioned that a pharmacy would be an example of that. Would Rite Aid be able to dispense this? I'm assuming that they could not since it's directly across the street from Signal Hill Elementary, but maybe you're saying that it can if it's not stopped on both sides of 73, since it's on the southbound.
Yeah, so I mentioned pharmacy in relationship to the medical marijuana statute that was enacted back in 2010. That was on another issue, but no form of cannabis business, whether, and by the way, they all have to be inside. We don't allow any outdoor activities whatsoever, primarily because of the odor, and we don't want outdoor storage, and it goes to the aesthetics. But primarily, if within a CVS or within a pharmacy or within a strip center or a standalone facility, all of those restrictions that I went through would still apply.
So are you saying that Rite Aid cannot sell this?
Which Rite Aid?
The one directly across the street from Signal Hill School on Route 73.
If it's within, is it within, I don't know, if it's within 1,000 feet of the school, then the answer would be no.
Okay, I believe it would be, but
Or
it's on the
residential-
south side. So that's what my question is. If it's on the south side of 73,
Well, you also have the other restrictions, which would include 1,000 feet from any residential on that side and 1,000 feet from a place of worship. And then in that case, we'd have 1,000 feet from a public playground. So all those things would come into play. I haven't mapped it out exactly, but it would.
Stuart, it's within the 1,000 feet according to the map. Ms. Geary, though, I want to just clarify. I know Mr. Stuart Platt has said this quite a few times. The 1,000 feet as the crow flies from the school is not affected in any way, shape, or form by Route 73. That 1,000 foot does cross 73 and therefore would cover that property. However, I also don't want the example of the use of a pharmacy to confuse this conversation further. We are talking about this ordinance as related to recreational adult use. There are other laws that cover medicinal use, which is unrelated to what we are talking about this evening.
okay. I guess that answers my question. Lastly, do we know if Berlin or Mount Laurel is also looking at having these types of businesses in their township? Do you know that offhand?
We have been in touch with community leaders from all across South Jersey. I can say that Committeewoman February and I have spoken with other townships, Evesham, Mount Laurel, Delran, and they're, as far as we understand, are also considering them. Berlin, we have not spoken with, but we are aware that Evesham is considering it as well, and Mount Laurel.
I can tell you that West Berlin or Berlin Township has temporarily opted out and are studying the issue. Delran Township has opted in. At least those are at least 2 communities that Deputy Mayor Nacito mentioned.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have another comment? Please join in.
Promoting the next attendee, Troy Miles.
Good evening, everyone. My wife had spoke earlier. We live at 2 Quail Hollow Court in Voorhees. One of the things that allured us to, that brought us to this community, is the fact of the necessity for there wasn't a lot of retail around us. There wasn't a lot of other things going on, but we also moved here during COVID in March of 2021. And we have seen a distinct difference in the amount of traffic during COVID versus post-COVID. Now, with the understanding that not everyone's on the road, but we've also had the increase of everyone going back to work, as well as the summer traffic that is high in this neighborhood, as well as the amount of traffic we experience every day by being in the cul-de-sac directly across from the school. So I say all that really just to say that I am in complete agreement with all my fellow residents, as well as the amount of traffic and the increase in traffic is a huge concern for us. We were not really aware of how bad the traffic is around here until the summertime came. So thank you very much for your time and allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Do we have another comment? Please join in.
Voting the next attendee. Adam Estino.
Hi, good evening. Adam Olstino, 167 William Feather Drive. I just want to thank the committee for working with Sturbridge Lakes residents, the trustees, Ed, Jamie, the other members of our board of trustees who spoke tonight. I just want to reiterate that we have a lot of concerns about traffic, and it's not inconsequential. I know there's it's a state highway, and I know a lot of the issues on that state highway are beyond our control, especially when there's traffic coming from other towns. But it seems that we should be very cautious of what we add to it, because it really is taking away from our quality of life in the neighborhood. We have about 800 houses in a neighborhood, and some days we can't even get out. Signal Hill, Lakeside, that light is sometimes a Manhattan traffic jam. And I would hope that on another issue that the township does work with the state and maybe try to relieve some of these issues. But when it comes to the ordinance at hand, I want to lend my support to what the Board of Trustees in Sturbridge have proposed, that both sides of Sturbridge of 73 between William Feather and Signal Hill, both north and south bound on 73, are exempted from the marijuana or cannabis retail and 1 through 6. So I thank you very much. I thank you for your time. I thank you for consideration. I hope that you will vote for that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, the gentleman actually makes a good point with regard to the concerns. We're hearing a lot about traffic. With the passage of the new infrastructure bill, which seems to be bipartisan in Washington, it seems like that's getting closer and closer every day. Maybe we should reach out and have our engineer take a look at just generally Route 73 and get our request in early with the state, because there's certainly going to be transportation funding available for roadway renovations. And it certainly can't hurt to get our nose in there early to raise this issue, particularly since it looks like there's going to be some funding. So maybe that's something committee would authorize our engineer to initiate. I think would be, we keep hearing that over and over. I think be a good thing to initiate by the governing body.
It's a great idea. Thank you, Howard.
Mayor, before you promote the next resident, Mr. Ostino talked about the Sturbridge Lakes Association restriction from all classes of cannabis on both sides. I think that was not the request that I understood from the email. I mean, it's in the email from Mr. Ferrugia. His request on behalf, and again, the governing body is free to do what it wants, but his request was to only allow one class in that area between Signal Hill and William Feather, which would be the retail only. So Mr. Ostino said no classes. I understood the request to be the fallback request, if you will, to be just the one retail dispensary class. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Platt, they indicated that the board would be behind that compromised plan and support it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
That was my understanding also. Do we have another public comment? Please join in.
Voting the next attendee, Connie Wagner.
All right. Okay. Okay, can you hear me? All right, great.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for hearing our calls. And I'd also like to thank Ed Ferrugia and Jamie Ostino for being great advocates. I have a visual picture, 172 William Feather Drive, Sturbridge Lakes. Visual picture of a football field. 1,500 feet is half a football field. That's pretty small. I want to take a little different route. I wish we had gone the route of Cherry Hill and studied the issues before committing and said no, knowing that we could change that instead of making such sweeping changes. I want to also say that I think the vote in the state was premature. It appealed to people's wants and not what really could take place. There's so many studies of how marijuana has affected the brain, personality studies. The Cato Institute graphed 12 states that legalized cannabis and compared them to US trends. And they saw an increased amount of suicide rates, teens went up, alcohol use, criminal justice expenditures, especially in the first couple years. So I'm really disappointed with the state. And I'm also disappointed that we didn't say no first to do more of the studies. And that's basically, where I am. I just wanted to go on the record to say that because I think we're in for a lot of problems down the road. All right. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mayor, before you promote the next resident, I just want to remind, and committee knows this, but members of the public, this was not a quick decision made by anybody. We did a lot of studying. The planning board's been looking at cannabis for some time. We had the medical cannabis law since 2010. We've been studying this area, and the planning board's always looking at these issues. And committee studied this issue extensively over the past 6 months with a lot of revisions to the proposed ordinance. So this is not a one-off, or in my mind, it was not something that was not done without science, planning science, zoning science, and representing the community science. I think that all went into it. So this was just not a quick decision. It was planned properly. Whatever you do decide, there's been a lot of input from a lot of people, mayor, committee, planning board, residents, and other township officials. So I think that needs to be stated. A lot of people work very hard. We have an excellent planner as well who worked very hard on this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We have another public comment. Please join in.
Promoting the next attendee, Lori Davis.
How you doing, Mayor and Council? Thank you for our time. My name is Michael Davis. I'm with my wife, Lori Davis. We're at 118 William Feather Drive. One of the councilmen had mentioned that there was provisions in place about to prohibit the or limit the odor from the venting of the marijuana. The Curaleaf facility in Belmar, which is right along Route 42, the radius of the smell, the odor, is at least a half mile. It crosses over a 10-lane highway at that point, where you can smell it when it's venting over the other side of Route 42. A lot of the residents here are also from Sturbridge, along with myself, but this is going to be a Voorhees issue as well. No matter where you place this facility, you're going to have a issue where the odor will be overwhelming throughout many areas throughout this beautiful neighborhood that we all love to live in, this beautiful town of Voorhees. So if you can just give some clarification on what modifications are going to be done for the venting process, which is an important aspect of the cultivation of marijuana due to the excessive amount of heat that is contributed through the grow lights and everything of that nature. What exactly can you do to limit the odor that's going to be produced from the venting? And thank you for our time.
Great question. Stuart?
Mayor, that is a very good question. I'll just read directly from the ordinance. It says all licenses, except for 6, which is just a transport, just vehicles going back and forth, shall provide detailed information on odor control from these sites. This shall include air treatment systems with sufficient odor absorbing ventilation and exhaust systems, such that any odors generated inside the facility are not detectable and not detectable by a person of reasonable sensitivity anywhere on adjacent property, within public rights of way, or within any other unit located in the same building if the use occupies a portion of the building. So what this really means, and unlike noise, the level of odor cannot, it's not there's not a meter that says, hey, the odor reaches a level. We couldn't put a number there that says 100, but we have given site plan control, which means that inside these facilities where there is cultivation, processing, retail, there has to be proper scrubbing, ventilation, odor mitigation controls that the applicant must demonstrate before the planning board will ever grant approval. So I read directly from the ordinance, and I've sat on applications in other towns where these types of facilities are in there, and these are the types of requirements that are happening. They would have to be part of the site plan process, and they would have to demonstrate that there would be, at least in our ordinance, undetectable odor outside the facility or to adjacent property line, and certainly if there is more than one user within the particular facility. So I have a fairly stringent ordinance requirement that they have to demonstrate to the satisfaction of the planning board.
So, sir, all I would just ask is that the members of the planning board would just take the time and go out to these areas, particularly the Curaleaf along Wellwood Drive and Belmar, and just take times. Usually it's at least every 2 to 3 hours is the venting process from that facility. And like I said, it takes at least a half-mile radius of the odor that's produced from there. Several of the businesses in there have made numerous complaints. The homeowners are in a situation now where they can't even sell their homes because a minute a prospective buyer goes there, it's the first thing that they smell. And again, the township of Voorhees is a desirable location where, residents desire to be here, and we don't want to lose that by having this odor pollution that's going to become overwhelming for not just the Sturbridge community, but like I said, you put in a half-mile radius anywhere on Route 73. Now you're talking to homes along Crescent, along 561, homes near E.T. Hamilton, which is, Blue Ribbon School. I think it could be detrimental to this whole area. And again, thank you for your time.
Mayor, if I may, to the Belmar situation in Curaleaf, where I actually grew up and now represent. I just want to hold on, our timer went off there. They've had some complaints on Harding Avenue, which is where the facility is located, but I do not recall any other complaints beyond that general area. I don't think their ordinance has and I didn't draft it because they've been there. The medicinal facility's been there for a long time. And it's the largest, that one facility is larger than all the other processing facilities in the state of New Jersey. It is of all the medicinal marijuana cannabis facilities. And I just confirmed with their mayor, who's a friend, that we have not received complaints across Route 42. There have been complaints on the immediate street, but I think we've done two things. In the ordinance, I think Mr. Platt has taken great care to make sure that the odor cannot permeate by law outside of the perimeter of the property line. Is that correct, Mr. Platt? I think
That is correct, yes.
I think that's what he said. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. And that, some of the Curaleaf is making application to permit it to be recreational as well, and expand their use. I can tell you when that occurs, that same language that Mr. Platt has inserted in the Voorhees ordinance will be used in the Belmar ordinance to address any odor complaints that do occur on the street where that facility is located. I just wanted to give you the benefit of my experience and make sure that we have accurate information out there.
Thank you. We have other public comment. Please join in.
Promoting Joanne Savio. Looks like Miss Savio is not there.
John, she actually already did speak. That may have just been a mistake and she stayed in the queue.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. That's why I saw her and I saw Gregory off again.
Yeah, Greg spoke too, I believe. I know, but I do see Mr. Ferrugia probably wants to wrap up.
Okay, one moment. I see two others that had also spoken. Let me do Mr. Frigeria.
Yes, hi. I don't, for some reason, I don't, okay, here we go.
You're all good.
Yeah, I get some ad that comes on at first. Okay, you can hear me. So I just want to clarify just regarding what the position of the association was. We did ask that all cannabis businesses be prohibited from both sides of 73 in front of the neighborhood. We did also say that in the alternative, because it was mentioned that there might be an exception made from that on the retail, that we would accept that compromise. So it comes down to our concern that I really thought that the committee was going to consider amending to restrict the businesses on both sides of 73. And we do have concerns about the odor and about possibly when we talk about traffic, not what goes up and down Route 73, but what actually enters and leaves 73, right in your proximity. But in any event, not to get into the details, I just want to clarify that our request is that your restriction apply to both sides of 73 between the entrances of our neighborhood. And I appreciate your consideration of that possibility. And thank you very much.
And just to be clear, Ed, do you mean on both sides? Is your request on both sides for as Mr. Ostino stated, nothing for 1 through 6, so not the retail either?
Well, that's our initial request, but we were willing to accept it if you permitted the retail, and that the other restrictions would probably not make retail an overwhelming impact. So that's, I guess, a pretty big compromise on our part. But in any event, that we would accept, but I really was thinking that you were considering both sides. So I would just ask you to consider your restriction either of everything or of everything but the retail on both sides of the section we're discussing. And I just wanted to clarify that so we're clear on what we've asked for.
Okay, I really appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comment?
We
Please join
have
in.
two that spoke before.
Right.
If you allow them now. Gregory Oft.
Mayor, could we consider a short recess in a moment?
Sure.
Guys, thanks for letting me come on back again real quick. There's been a lot of speculation about crime and the increase of crime around these types of facilities. So over the past hour, I decided to do some research. An article that stuck out to me was a study done by the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. And what they did is they went to one of the first two states to legalize this type of marijuana sale and distribution, and that was Colorado. So they looked at the 3 years prior to the legalization of marijuana in Colorado from 2011 to 2013. And then they looked at the 3 years immediately following the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, which is 2014, 2015, and 2016. And what they did is they studied the streets surrounding these types of facilities. Property crimes went up 18%. Drug crimes went up 28%. Something they clarified is disorder crimes and specifically said criminal mischief went up over 17%. You know, I know Chief Voorhees spoke about the difference between rural and suburban and urban type areas, you know, in places maybe like Denver and Colorado, but Denver is continually one of the safest places in the country, big cities in the country, as well as Colorado being one of the safest states. And we see these types of increase in crimes throughout the state. You know, I was involved in emergency services for almost 20 years, starting here in Voorhees and then moving to one of our neighboring communities. And unfortunately, the majority, I don't want to say majority, but a good part of the violent crime that I dealt with in treating patients that were victims of violent crime. And then when I moved to the emergency department as a nurse, a lot of them had to do with drugs. I know one of my neighbors brought up being, I can't remember if she's a criminal defense attorney or a prosecutor, but in my personal experience, a lot of the violent crime that I dealt with dealt directly with drugs. And it was in corridors such as 73. One of the areas I worked in was a corridor on Route 70. And one of the things that stands out in my head was somebody shot somebody in the face over, you took my drugs. Whether or not that happens in Voorhees, like Chief Voorhees said, we'd have no idea. We can't put a wall up around town. But I just thought we should put it into perspective that, you know, studies have actually been done in communities and states where these type of laws and facilities have been around for some years now. You know, and they're finding the exact opposite of what you guys are saying, talking to surrounding communities where they don't have any issues. You know, I also, another thing that I found was, you know, we keep talking about these towns that they, you know, Evesham said yes, Delran said yes, but we're not talking about as the towns that have said no. So out of about 149 towns in South Jersey, less than a third have said yes. 100 towns have said no. Washington Township going as far as saying a lack of clarity and direction in the state law, potential negative impacts upon the children of our township, potential detriments on our residents, and that they needed more time to study and review the act and its impact on the township and its residents. You know, I'm really happy that you guys are looking at amending what's currently there. But, you know, for me, I think, you know, what's the rush? Why are we jumping into this when we can wait, you know, a period of time to see how it impacts communities around us that are doing it, so we can make a more informed decision, more educated decision about how it's going to impact Voorhees Township. Thanks for letting me speak again.
Thank you. It is 9:12, and I think we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll resume at 9:17. Please. Thank you.
In progress.
Okay, it looks like we have everybody back. Thank you for that short break. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to comment? Please join in.
We have two. I'm going to promote the next one, Kelly Cover. And then after Kelly, we'll have one more, Miss Maureen Geary again, has raised her hand.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Kelly Cover, and I live at 144 William Feather Drive. First and foremost, I want to thank the mayor and the council, women and men, for being on this evening. I know this has gone on fairly late, but I echo my concerns with my fellow Sturbridge Lakes residents, and I hope that everyone on this call appreciates the pride that we have, not only for Sturbridge Lakes and our community, but for Voorhees itself. And I know that members of this board will make the right decision that's not only best for our neighborhood, but for Voorhees itself. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Currently, I have no raised hands.
Motion to close public portion on the ordinance, Mayor?
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close public portion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The public portion for the second reading of that ordinance is closed.
Mayor, I just want to indicate, if I may, that this is only a vote on that which we have to put in place on second reading so that we don't get locked into a state mandate situation. Some of the other things that we were talking about with regard to introduction of amendments are a little further down.
Correct.
Make sure everybody's on the same page because we were at it quite a while.
Yes, and we are under time constraints to adopt the ordinance, which we certainly may amend, but is there a motion on the second reading of that ordinance?
So moved.
I will second it. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Sorry, I was muted.
All right, maybe have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Pepper? Yes, with the caveat, as Attorney Long has indicated, that we will be considering further amendments, I vote yes.
Mr. Platt,
Yes.
Ms. Aceto,
I want to be clear on something, that the vote is for the ordinance only and not for the amendment. So I just want to be, if our legal counsel could confirm that correctly.
Absolutely. That absolutely true.
I second that motion.
Okay. So I personally would like to abstain from the vote this evening. I know that some residents are concerned about a conflict of interest on my behalf and on behalf of committee members. I want to assure you that my vote to abstain is based on what I'm hearing from the residents, not my personal interest or the location of my own residence. I want to thank the residents of our community for attending, reaching out and expressing your concerns. I can only relate your concerns to my own experience leaving Sturbridge on Cooper Road where Diggerland is, which is not something that we had control over. That is in a different town, but I do understand, and I'm not at all comparing that to a cannabis business, but I do understand the unintended consequence and the impact that has had on traffic and the experience of those of us living around it, or the life experience. It's also always been my strong observation that we must protect the areas around our schools, which is why this committee was fully behind the removal of the old abandoned house that some of you may remember was on the corner of Signal Hill Drive and Route 73. Although that was a rateable for the township, we did have that knocked down because it was, in our opinion, an attractive nuisance right next to one of our schools. Personally speaking, I would like to gather even more information, as some of you requested, only because, to be clear, not because I do not support the legislation, but because tonight has presented some conflict and some confusion in my mind regarding the options of 1 through 6 versus just having option 5, which was retail only. And I really don't want to go into an amendment situation where our committee is divided. And I believe that we can have more dialogue and discussion and come to an agreement that will work with the association and consider all the residents in Voorhees, not just my own neighbors. So I would like to see the amendment personally include both sides of the highway from Signal Hill Drive to William Feather to protect the residents along our medical mile. But I really need more information that I think needs to be discussed with committee in an environment that allows for us to have more discussion and get more information.
Thank you.
Mayor McDonough.
Yes. So by a 3-0 vote, that ordinance passes.
301, Mayor.
I'm sorry, 3-0 and an abstention. Our next matter is the second reading of an ordinance of the Township of Voorhees, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey to amend and supplement the Code of the Township of Voorhees, Title 8, Administration, Chapter 34, entitled Finance and Taxation, to establish new Section 34.51 Cannabis Municipal Tax, to collect a statutorily authorized 2% municipal transfer tax on cannabis sales by Class 1, 2, and 5 license holders, and 1% municipal transfer tax on cannabis sales by Class 3 license holders. I believe Mr. Platt explained this ordinance earlier in his presentation. So this is the second reading. I will open it up to the public for any comment. Please join in if you have a comment on this ordinance.
Seeing no one raising their hand, move to close public portion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The public portion on that is closed. Is there a motion on that ordinance?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Peproy,
Yes.
Mr. Platt,
Yes.
Ms. Nacito,
Yes.
Mayor McDonough.
Yes, so carried. Our next matter is the first reading of an ordinance amending an ordinance of the Township of Voorhees, Chapter 104, possessing backyard hens in Voorhees. Do I have a motion on the first reading of that ordinance?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Our next matter is the first reading of an ordinance of the Township of Voorhees establishing a bus stop and/or shuttle service at the corner of Lafayette Avenue and Haddonfield Berlin Road. Is there a motion on that first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So carried. Our next matter is scheduled to be the amendment to the cannabis ordinance. I'm hearing from my colleagues that perhaps we should hold off on this and further investigate. Is that
So,
what
yes,
I'm?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to motion to table that because again, that goes along with having a more comprehensive dialogue between committee. I would really like to make sure that all of us are enrolled in this same vision for the township and the residents, and work closely with the association so that we're not just making a decision tonight that doesn't allow for us to do more research on some of the points that were brought to our attention tonight from the residents, not just from our own research.
Can I ask the question, is the reading of this first amendment a preclusion to adopting a further second amendment to the ordinance?
They have two choices. If you make a motion to table and there's a second, there can be no discussion and you immediately have to proceed to a vote. If you introduce the ordinance, then you have an opportunity to make whatever amendments you want up to and including the time at least 7 days prior to the adoption, that you publish in the newspaper a copy of how it will read at second reading and public hearing and adoption. So you could adopt it in its current form. You could adopt it with retail on one side. You could adopt it with just retail on another. You could adopt it however you want tonight, even just by title only, actually. And you would just have to come to some discussion, perhaps at a work meeting, as to where everybody is on everything we heard tonight. And then you would advertise, authorize the clerk to advertise it based upon that discussion. And then it would proceed to second reading with the amendments in place. That could occur in September. It could occur at the end of August. Would likely be September at that particular point.
So, Mr. Long, you're.
Mayor, may I? I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. I just had a comment about Howard's technical instruction. I just wanted to add to it.
Sure.
So because this is a land use ordinance, there'd be other things we'd have to be concerned about. So what Deputy Mayor Nacita is talking about is, further view on what you're doing on 73 in terms of different classes. That I certainly understand. I do want to make sure, and if that happens, then we have to special noticing, and it all has to go to the planning board as well. One thing I just want to make sure the committee understands, if you're not ready to make a verbal amendment to the amendment tonight, one of the things that is in this amendment that I think it's important to at least get it introduced is that playground restriction. Right. That would be so I want to try to make sure that you all have your cake and eat it. So get that playground restriction. Jackie made some other changes that you had requested about enforcement. Get that in there at least now. We certainly won't go to the planning board. We won't advertise it. We won't do the special noticing until such time as the deputy mayor's conversations are come and brought to a final conclusion. That's what I would recommend that you do tonight. I just didn't want you to forget there's some important things that are already in the amendment, but certainly you could table it as well, whatever you decide.
Okay, then I would be fine if your legal advice to us is that we can proceed with the amendment, but because it's the first reading, we can add to the amendment. That's what I'm hearing you say, correct? Okay. So I would be fine with that. And I do want to recognize that, all of my fellow committee members that are on tonight, and specifically Committeewoman February, did a lot of research and put a lot of time into making sure that we considered these areas specific and added things in like the playground. So I don't want to discount the work that they did with my comments. I just need more time.
So my understanding is that we'll proceed forward with the first reading of the ordinance as it amends as to 1,000-foot buffer for the playground. We will continue to research how we will further restrict the 73 corridor, if at all. But I believe we have come to at least an understanding that there will be some further restriction. It's just based on how much. Is that fair?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Nocita, do I understand you withdrawing your motion to table based upon the reasons that you stated?
Yes, I withdraw with the understanding that, as the mayor said, I will be in favor of further restrictions. Or
Okay.
discussing them and voting for them.
Is there a motion on the first reading of that ordinance?
So moved with, again, the same understanding as Committeewoman Nocito just explained.
Before we have a second, would anyone consider putting the north-south just retail tonight as well? Just to have that in there to give at least the residents some confidence that that's going to be part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, for sure. With the understanding that we can further discuss the south side. Yeah, definitely.
So then I'll make a motion to verbally amend this first reading of the amendment to the ordinance to include a restriction that only Class 5 cannabis establishments shall be permitted in the zone that is on the northbound side of Route 73 between Signal Hill and William Feather Drive.
And for the record, that Class 5 is retail dispensaries only.
Yes.
I will second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Can I ask a quick question? So if we make that, decision this evening, and are we free to amend that at a later date to restrict completely? If we come to
Absolutely.
that decision? Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
As I understand the instructions, Deputy Mayor, we're not with the verbal amendment to the amendment, we're not doing anything further until you consider even further restrictions, which whenever you guys consider it, that's when we'll go on to the other things we have to do to get to a final reading.
Right. I don't want the residents to walk away feeling as though we're not going to have discussions about those who don't want the establishment, any 1 through 6 at all on those two sides of the highway.
You can even amend that, absolutely. So we're not locked into this, but I just don't want to go through the whole noticing process and planning board process until committee really knows what they want to do. And I also want to make sure, I think it's a good idea, the residents know that we are doing a restriction. It's just a matter of further restriction. So whichever way, this is purely a policy decision, whichever way you want to go, we're going to, if you pass this amendment that's been verbally amended, we can make further change. We're not going to do anything further with the ordinance in terms of its evolution towards adoption. At least that's my understanding. Mr. Long, do you agree with that?
Yes, I do, Stuart. Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend the ordinance to reflect the 1,000-foot buffer as to playgrounds and to restrict cannabis to retail on the northbound side of Route 73 between Signal Hill Drive and William Feather Drive. Is there any further discussion on that?
I would just like to say that, and thank you, Michelle, for your comments. I did listen. I appreciate all of the members of the community who logged in tonight to express their concerns and weigh in and give their opinions. I believe that we will continue to have these conversations. We have looked and spent a significant amount of time since the referendum in November was overwhelmingly passed, and even predating my involvement on committee. My fellow committee members have done a significant amount of research in connection with medicinal use. That does include confirming for ourselves that traffic impact studies would be a requirement, that the type of business is with the tone of the areas that they have been laid in the map as prepared by our planner, Mika. And thank you, Mika, for being on tonight. And, you know, obviously these additions are here for the protection of our residents that we believe are stricter than what we would have received if we fell under the default state rules. And we have spent a significant amount of time discussing that with all the leaders within our group. But I do want to allow the time for additional communication with other members of the community, including the leaders of the homeowners associations and others who have spoken with us today. So.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Our next matter is the first.
Mayor, I hate to interrupt, will you be needing me for anything else this evening?
You never know.
Where you going this late, Stuart?
The Yankees game is on. Come on, whatever you want to do. You want me to hang around? I would just make a note, and we have one of the best clerks in the state, D. In order for this ordinance to take effect, we have to publish notice of adoption. We definitely need to do that before August 21st. So I know you're on that and just want to remind you of that. And I
Yes.
appreciate all your help with the agendas. Thank you so much, D.
Yeah, they should publish this Friday.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Our
Stuart.
next matter is the first reading of an ordinance of the Township of Voorhees, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey, repealing and/or amending various sections of the Unified Land Development Ordinance, OLDO, and the Township Code, including Section 150.14 B1 and 2, as relates to fence heights in a side yard. Section 150.17 C, 1, B, and E, as relates to roof-mounted solar energy systems. Section 150.14 B3 B, as relates to 5-foot setback for fences in side yard and backyards. Section 154.006A3 and 6, as it relates to sighting fences within buffer areas. And Section 154.006 E3B, as it relates to exempting tree clearance of less than 500 square feet from compensatory tree replacement. Do I have a motion on the first reading of that ordinance?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say that it's my understanding that this came about as a result of years of feedback from the community. So I just want to make a point that we do hear you. I think Mr. Spellman would agree with that, with the continuous collaboration with our zoning and planning folks to understand that things perhaps were set up before the township was so populous, and that we need to make amendments as, you know, things go along.
Yes, I agree. I think this brings the restrictions a little bit more liberal and addresses concerns that really are no longer concerns. So I believe I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Our next section is public comment for resolutions only. If anyone from the public has a comment on any of our resolutions, please join in.
Seeing no hands raised, move to close public portions for resolutions.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The public portion for resolutions is closed. Our resolutions this evening are number 178.21, memorializing an executive session from the meeting of July 19, 2021. Resolution number 179-21, establishing the extension of the third quarter grace period. Number 180-21, approving refunds of the tax collector. Number 181-21, amending records of the tax assessor. Number 182-21, rescinding resolution number 176.21, which were the estimated tax bills. Resolution number 183-21, approving a settlement agreement for a reverse tax appeal for block 207, lot 1, 2401 Evesham Avenue. Resolution number 184-21, approving a developer's agreement for WHR Partners LLC, block 178, lots 2 and 11. Resolution number 185-21, authorizing an amendment to a developer's agreement between Voorhees Township and Voorhees Housing Associates LLC, block 263, lot 11. Resolution number 186-21, authorizing a federal aid agreement by and between the Township of Voorhees and New Jersey Department of Transportation for the installation, excuse me, of pedestrian improvements along Echelon Road from the Town Center Boulevard to Whitehorse Road. Resolution number 187-21, authorizing the award of a contract under a national cooperative pricing agreement for one 19-inch brush chipper with Tier 4F engine to Vermeer Corporation. Resolution number 188-21, authorizing the publication of an intent to award a contract under a national cooperative pricing agreement for one Tarco leaf loader through ESCNJ and purchase from Cherry Valley Tractor Sales. Resolution number 189-21, awarding a quote for the construction of a lacrosse wall at the Gian Giulio Complex to Act Global. Number 190-21, awarding a purchase through a state contract for vehicles through Winter Ford. Resolution number 191-21, authorizing the award of a contract for the Echelon Road Pedestrian Improvements Project to Charles Marandino LLC. Do I have a motion for approval of those resolutions?
So moved.
Motion. Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Our next resolutions are number 192-21, approving the promotion of Captain Michael Wharton to the position of Battalion Chief. Resolution number 193-21, approving the promotion of firefighter Tom O'Brien to the position of Lieutenant. Resolution number 194-21, approving the hiring of Henry Birkenhauer to the position of firefighter in the Voorhees Township Fire Department. Resolution number 195-21, approving the hiring of Stephen DiRenzo to the position of firefighter in the Voorhees Township Fire Department. Number 196-21, approving the hiring of Adam Layden to the position of firefighter in the Voorhees Township Fire Department. Number 197-21, approving the hiring of Chad Coggin to the part-time position of emergency medical technician in the Voorhees Township Fire Department. And resolution number 198-21, accepting the resignation of firefighter Stephen Skipton from the Voorhees Township Fire Department. Do I have a motion on approval of all those resolutions?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. There's no need for an executive session this evening. Next is approval of our minutes from July 12th, 2021, our minutes from July 19th, 2021, our CFO's report dated August 4th, 2021, our registrar's report for June 2021, our tax collector's report for July 2021, bills for July 26, 2021, and bills for August 9th, 2021. Do I have a motion for approval of those?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So carried. Our next section is comments from our committee. I would just like to remind our community that our summer concert series will resume with the Beatles tribute band, Beatles, a free concert on Thursday, August 19th at 7:30 p.m. at Conway Park. It's a great show. Come on out. It's always a nice evening. Any other comments from our committee this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to thank our police department for hosting, and I thank you also for attending the National Night Out that you hosted last week. It was something that I know we all missed last year. I know that a lot of residents look forward to it every year. So I'm really grateful for the time and energy and effort that went into that. So thank you.
It was a great evening, and everybody loves the Canine Show. I'll tell you, that's always the highlight of the evening. So great job, Chief, and great job by your department. Any other comments from our committee? Our final portion is our public portion. If anybody from the public has any additional comments, please join in.
See one hand raised, John.
I see Mike Wharton's hand raised.
Yep.
I see Mike Wharton's hand down.
Yes.
Unless he's put in.
Maybe accident.
Yeah. Seeing no one's hand raised for any questions for the general public portion, move to close public portion.
We have
Second.
Mike.
No,
Oh,
we
Mike.
have him.
Oh, Mike, you're here. Hey.
Hi, Mike.
How you doing? I'll keep it real brief. I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Bordy and Chief Poland, as well as Mayor and Township Committee on the approval of promotion this evening. I'm very grateful for it and look forward to working and continuing to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As do we. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Seeing no more comments or hands raised, move to close public portion.
Second.
Your motion is second.
I think we've lost
All in
Mayor
favor.
Mike.
Go ahead, Michelle, take over.
All in favor? All in
Aye.
favor?
We are adjourned.
We are adjourned.
We're adjourned.
We're bringing him back.
Oh, there he is. We brought you back in time to adjourn us, Mayor.
You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Mayor adjourned again.
We are adjourned. Everybody have a great evening.
Bye.
Good night.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye, everyone.